Just recently, there was a PAX East interview with Pete Hines around Fallout 76. You probably saw this, or at least the headline from the numerous articles that were basically just a repost of it. Pete Hines describes how he wasn't expecting players to be so disinterested in PvP. He thought they would actually have a much larger interest in that component of the game. And naturally, over time, with subsequent updates, we've seen PvP and adventure mode become a very small aspect of Fallout 76 overall, to where now it's basically non-existent. But as I was thinking about this, making my video on it, it actually made me think about some interesting stuff that also almost happened. Several things in Fallout 76's files that reveal to us Bethesda's original plans for certain aspects of this game, or just some things that were almost a DLC or almost a part of one of the other larger DLCs but just didn't make the cut. So in this video, kind of going over some of the major ones, I want to share what I found to be some of the most interesting cut content from Fallout 76. Now of course, the game isn't over. There's still a lot of content to likely come to this game over the next few years, so some of this may end up getting implemented in some way. But with this video, I really tried to focus on things that really seemed like they were cut, or they just decided to go in a different direction with that concept. One of the major new additions we saw to Fallout 76 in 2019 was of course the Battle Royale mode. Now among fans of the series, this is somewhat dividing. I for one actually really enjoy PvP in this game. But given that all we've really had before was PvE, it's natural that the audience kind of graduates towards something a bit easier and more forgiving, compared to Battle Royale, where one death is pretty much the end. Well, it seems like that before Battle Royale was actually implemented, Bethesda was testing or had ideas for a variety of different modes for Fallout 76. And one of the interesting parts about this is some of this actually dates all the way back to the beta of the game, as that's when some of the original data mines of this content came around. We saw data mine loading screens describing how a team deathmatch mode would be timed. The higher scoring team would win, how the objective was to eliminate enemy players in order to score points, and even how the arenas from this team deathmatch were randomly picked from the many locations of Appalachia. With some of the later updates to the game, we saw more of this. In the files, we could find a listing for Team Deathmatch or even Team Deathmatch 1 Life, but even separately, there was entries for something known as a Workshop Assault and a Capture the Flag mode. And among several updates, it seems like Bethesda was actually internally testing some of these modes, as we saw fairly often changes to something known as the 76 Danger Room or 76 PvP Playground. These being two cells or locations in-game that were getting edits, but we didn't exactly know what they were. And one additional piece of functionality that was going to support these new game modes was something known as Quick Play. A UI and matchmaking was actually created for this and implemented into the files of the game. It seemed like it would work pretty similar to just filling you in a match or matchmaking that we've seen in other games. And although this came much later, from those same beta data mines, we actually heard this described also. How each quick play PvE session will feature an event that you and your team are tasked with completing, and how quick play PvE matches you with other players ready to face the challenges of Appalachia as a team. Something that was discussed internally for a time with Bethesda was almost a way to search for servers with a certain bias or setting on them. It's not totally clear if this was this quick play feature or something totally different, but basically at one point they were discussing something where when searching for a server, you could say, hey, I want a server where people are actually looking to play events, and then it would connect you to a server with basically like-minded individuals. And there were supposed to be several different settings you could pick from this, and I think it actually could have made that random player experience quite a bit more interesting, especially if there was something like a PvP-focused server. Now, of course, in the end, we didn't really get any of this. It seems like Bethesda more or less just settled on either the survival mode or later on the Battle Royale mode. Likely those two modes are what formed out of these original ideas. But it's curious to think that, hey, maybe this is something they'll revisit in the future. I think a TDM mode would be much more befitting for a game like Fallout 76, but still giving you that fairly quick or to-the-point Fallout experience. Mainly because you could respawn hypothetically, maybe like a Base Wars or Capture the Flag, where you build up a camp, still have perk cards and builds, but considering most Fallout 76 players aren't necessarily PvP focused, you don't have the same degree of consequence that comes with death in Battle Royale. But it also is interesting to think that from the start, Bethesda seemed to have a plan to add some mode like this. These data mines are all the way from beta, so they were thinking even before the game released about adding in some kind of additional game mode. Which, speaking of, the first game mode we did get was Survival Mode, and many of you may remember that during the PAX East panel last year, the concept of survival seasons was mentioned by Todd Howard.
But we also have ideas for, this could be a seasons thing, where you'd have a survival season where you have to create a new character. It lasts a month. It allows us to kind of mess with the rules while keeping the regular player base and those characters without, messing them up. So we have a ton of ideas there we hope to see through.
So I don't know about you, but I actually really loved that idea. I feel like it would have been a very healthy way for the mode to flourish, where people don't have as much concern about losing that character because they would lose it anyway. But that's not just game modes. There's also quite a bit in the way of quests that were cut from the game but looked pretty promising or interesting. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre is a reference to a real-life event that I can't go into in this video because demonetized. But it seems like a Valentine's Day seasonal event was something Bethesda was tossing around doing, or at least a full-on event with a Valentine's Day theme. Several unique items were added for this: a special alcohol with Appalachia champagne, a pretty floral bouquet, expensive perfume, and even other things like fancy perfume. Like some of the other DLC events, this was actually going to be started with a warning poster, which would lead to some cliffs having to investigate carcasses and collecting a variety of items, somewhat similar to some of the other limited time events. One of the other big ones is Vault 63, even though Vault 94 was added and now is getting cut with Wastelanders, and Vault 96 is still apparently coming at some point, although we haven't heard anything around that in a long while. Vault 63 is one of those ones that was added to the game, actually has a full-on interior, although it isn't quite as complete as the other two, but we just have never heard anything about it. There haven't been updates to this particular vault in months, and for me, I find this to be one of the more curious ones, as they actually started adding in new vaults before using some of the old ones, and especially this one. It's just been sitting here for a while. It's actually fairly close to some of the other Wastelanders locations. This one likely isn't cut, but will come at a later point, but as far as Wastelanders go, it doesn't seem like there's anything getting changed with this particular vault. What to me is actually probably the most widely known piece of cut content or just unused content for Fallout 76 is around the Race for the Presidency quest. This because it's basically complete functionally and even has several awards associated with it. It would be a race across Appalachia against other players to actually collect votes from some of the voting machines. You would have to actually manually vote for yourself. This would take you all across Appalachia having to register to vote, to actually collect ballots, or even get endorsements, which would give you certain bonuses, and whoever won would actually get a presidential seal. This could actually be redeemed in a special room in the White Springs bunker that is otherwise totally unused, and to this day remains totally unused. You could either get the presidential Gauss rifle, power armor, or power suit, which again, all of this is items and content that is fully in the game. It basically looks like it's just ready for release, but for one reason or another, it has never seen the light of day. And this is another really old one. It hasn't seen updates in a very long time. A couple of quests that I found particularly interesting are basically modified or early variants of existing quests. One such one is a habitat for beasts. In this, you would basically attract certain friendly animals to a certain location, have a scientist be studying them, then actually defend them from hordes of enemies. This is basically identical to the Arcos Pharma event. So it seems like this was one of those ideas they were tossing around and almost implemented it this way, but instead went for something a bit bigger with its own standalone location. It seems like perhaps Bethesda at one point thought that they would actually have the 3 vaults for Fallout 76 open at release, that of course being Vault 63, 94, and 96, as there's actually a quest known as Lockdown that involved you getting key fragments from the overseers of all 3 vaults. And then you would have to return to Vault-Tec University and you would get some kind of classified Vault-Tec data drive. The description of this one describes going to all 3 vaults, and unless it just means the exterior version, to me it does suggest that perhaps at one point the vaults are meant to be launch content, which frankly makes a lot of sense. From day one, there's been 4 vaults on the map. One took 8 months to open and the other 2 have literally never opened. Ground Zero was an old Brotherhood of Steel quest and achievement that was based around the Brotherhood of Steel spyglass, where basically you would actually attract the Scorchbeast Queen and launch a nuke on them. Spyglass was this Brotherhood of Steel operation to eradicate the Scorchbeast, and it seems like this, instead of the more Enclave-focused quest, would have been the way you launch a nuke for the first time. Although the one to me that I find to be the most surprising is actually a quest or event known as the Welcoming Committee. It seems like this was meant to be a very early on quest where it basically describes that immediately after emerging from Vault 76, you actually find feral ghouls swarming the entrance. And you either are successful or unsuccessful in actually fending them off. If you're unsuccessful, they'll just wander away on your own. This definitely would have been quite a drastic change in the start of the game, not nearly as peaceful as it is right now, and I actually think it makes a lot of sense to cut this one. One of the other most interesting aspects of Fallout 76 cut content is when it comes to looking at items and NPCs, as there's quite a bit cut from these categories. One that I always have found just kind of funny, and I think several people are aware of, is Firecracker Whiskey. With Fallout 76's brewing system, we were supposed to get a Firecracker Whiskey, and the reason this one is kind of funny is when they originally teased that system, this was actually the only wine/spirit that they teased. They only teased 3 drinks in total, and one of them literally never made it into the game. I'm not totally sure why. There are actually several Firecracker modded drinks in the files of the game, but none of them actually ended up going live. It might literally just be one of those things that was kind of redundant because there are so many other beverages to choose from. I'm not sure what it is, but it seems like Bethesda has something against muskets in Fallout 76. Right around Thanksgiving, with a lot of the data mines that were coming out, it was looking like we were going to get this pretty cool musket skin on the Atomic Shop, or it could potentially even be a reward for some of the holiday events we saw during that time. But naturally, that period came and went, and we never saw it. To me, I find this surprising because I actually think this looks really cool. It's one of the few weapon skins I may have paid for, especially if it was for the black powder rifle. Similarly, another weapon that oddly just never made its way into Fallout 76 is the laser musket from Fallout 4. It's in the files, some hackers have even spawned it into the game, but there's no official way to get it even still. Now this is one that may end up coming with Wastelanders. I don't really know, honestly I don't miss it all that much, but it's curious. Despite how many weapons got carried over, this one just never did. But another one of the particularly old ones is actually the Black Knight, otherwise known as the Sten gun. So this naturally looks pretty cool. There's several Fallout 4 mods that recreate this in some way or another. And this was actually one of the earliest weapon skins to appear in the files for the Atomic Shop. Weapon skins being something where you basically just get a totally transformed look on a weapon just from a skin. This seems to be Bethesda's way of monetizing weapons without adding in pay-to-win content or actual new weapons. The Sten was likely one of their early tests around this, but I think it's a pretty cool one. Technically right now in the files of the game, it's meant to be a replacer for the hunting rifle. Likely that wouldn't have stayed, but the only thing it really looks similar to is a pipe pistol, and it would definitely be an improvement over the vanilla pipe pistol. At one point there's going to be owlets, just radiated owls in the game, but similar, something else that is actually really interesting is a look at the original Scorch Beast for Fallout 76. There were several different Scorch Beast designs which you could see from the concept art, but it looks like at one point they were actually planning a bat variant of this. Now in reality, Scorch Beasts are in fact irradiated bats exposed to biochemical experiments, but in the live version of the game, they've kind of taken on a bit of a different appearance. But seemingly at one point, Bethesda was tossing around the idea of having a more true-to-form bat model for the Scorch Beast. And we can see that here, which is another one that's been in the files for a long time, but with this one, we even have quite a bit of concept art showing off some of the different designs, including a 2-headed version, which I think just looks horrifying. But with this one, I may have actually saved one of the best entries for last, as one of the other things we have are alien variants. So in Fallout 76, there are technically no default or base aliens like the ones we saw in Fallout 4. We have the much cooler and much more interesting Flatwoods monster, which does seem to be very similar to those default aliens, just packaged in a different way. But in the files of the game, we find not only an alien, but also an alien lieutenant, alien captain, and alien star admiral. This being interesting, these are enemies we never saw in Fallout 4. Fallout 4 just featured the base alien. Now, it was confirmed at last year's E3 that Fallout 76 wasn't getting an Alien DLC in the short term, but now with that almost being a year ago, an Alien DLC definitely could be on the way. These variants have been in the game for a while, so it's not like this is confirming it or anything like that. But with how many mysterious or spooky alien things you could find all around the map, it definitely seemed like that theme or undertone was there for them to have a larger presence, even just giving us some backstory or explanation as far as the Flatwoods monster. Perhaps this was something they were planning to do at one point but ended up getting cut for one reason or another. Outside of these different variants, there's not any other information on this content. And frankly, the only information we've heard since this is actually that we weren't getting an Alien DLC, and how the lead developer preferred to have them be that mysterious thing in the background. But otherwise, yeah, that is a look at some of the most interesting cut content or potential future DLC for Fallout 76. I would say for the vast majority of this, it is going to remain cut content, stuff that just never sees the light of day for one reason or another. But when it comes to future DLCs, maybe they'll revisit some of these ideas. Maybe we actually will see the implementation of a TDM mode, maybe survival will come back with survival seasons, or perhaps we'll finally get some kind of Alien DLC. Either way, as always, again, I hope you guys found this video informative. It was actually pretty fun to make, digging through all of these old ideas and concepts, things we used to speculate before we got the past few DLCs. But until next time, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.